After the engagement party, tensions exploded. Taylor confronted Brooke in the hallway of Forrester Creations, refusing to let her walk away without drawing a line. Taylor, firm and unflinching, demanded that Brooke acknowledge the new boundary between them now that Ridge was officially her fiancé. It wasn't a request. It was a command rooted in years of rivalry, pain, and a battle neither woman had ever truly won. Brooke, defensive as always, brushed Taylor off with practiced indifference. She claimed innocence. She insisted she had respected the relationship. But Taylor wasn't relying on words. She had evidence, and she was ready to use it. The confrontation was only the beginning. Ridge arrived moments later, witnessing the tail end of their heated argument, and as he tried to mediate, things took a sudden and dark turn. Tempers boiled over. Words flew. Taylor accused Brooke of manipulation. Brooke mocked Taylor's insecurity. And then Ridge, caught between loyalty, guilt, and sheer frustration, lashed out. The slap landed with a crack. Taylor fell, her head hitting the floor with a sickening thud. She lost consciousness for a few seconds. When she came to, there was blood, dizziness, and the chaos of a stunned office staff reacting to a moment no one could believe had happened. Taylor was rushed to the hospital. The injury, though minor, a light concussion, ignited a firestorm no one could contain. The slap fractured more than Taylor's dignity. It sparked a legal and moral war that tore through the Forrester empire. Brooke, determined to clear her name, released security camera footage showing Taylor had been the one who ran toward Ridge first in the hallway, not the other way around. It was an attempt to show that Taylor had been the aggressor, the one provoking contact. But Taylor struck back just as hard. She unveiled a photograph taken on July 25th. A clear, high-resolution image of Brooke with her arms wrapped around Ridge in his office. The intimacy was undeniable. To the public and to Taylor's supporters, it confirmed everything she had said. Brooke had never respected her place. With the media sniffing blood, Steffi stepped up. She launched a calculated, fierce PR campaign using her influence in the fashion world to portray Brooke as a manipulative force who had long overstepped. The campaign didn't hold back. Headlines screamed about workplace boundaries, women disrespecting other women, and the toxic cycle of romantic interference. Steffi painted her mother as the victim, emotionally battered, physically harmed, and morally justified. Brooke, once a fashion icon and a symbol of resilience, found herself cast as a homewrecker in designer heels. Overnight, the story changed. She wasn't just another woman in a love triangle. She was a villain. Eric Forrester, the aging patriarch, watched as his family unraveled. His health was declining. The stress, doctors warned, could accelerate his condition. Desperate to preserve the family name and prevent the collapse of their Italian launch, he called for a ceasefire. He gathered Ridge, Brooke, Taylor, Steffi, and Thomas behind closed doors and demanded peace, at least publicly. The upcoming trip to Italy, meant to showcase Forrester's latest luxury collection, was now under scrutiny. Press, influencers, and buyers were already whispering. But Donna, Eric's wife and Brooke's sister, feared even this temporary truce was too fragile. The tension in the house, the whispered arguments, the late-night strategy sessions, it was too much. Eric was slipping, and she could see it. Then came the breaking point. The Italian Luxury Commission, the group responsible for organizing the show in Florence, issued an ultimatum. If the scandal wasn't resolved, the show would be canceled. Their brand could not be seen endorsing abuse, slander, or public conflict. With millions on the line and the Forrester name hanging by a thread, Ridge was cornered. To save the show, he had to make a public gesture, a written declaration that reaffirmed his support for Taylor, both professionally and personally. The document, carefully crafted by attorneys and PR experts, stated that he placed Taylor first in all matters regarding family, respect, and the integrity of the Forrester brand. Brooke read the statement. She didn't cry. She didn't plead. She walked into her attorney's office and filed a civil lawsuit for defamation, reputational harm, and emotional distress. She claimed that Ridge's public endorsement of Taylor, made without consulting her, and after weeks of character attacks, had tarnished her legacy. She wasn't after money. She wanted accountability. She wanted her name cleared. She wanted the world to know that she had fought for love, not to destroy it. And if Ridge wanted to cast her aside to protect his image, she would show him what it cost to betray someone who had once been the center of his world. The press exploded. Brooke Logan sues Ridge Forrester. The headlines screamed. The suit polarized the fashion world. Some saw her as vindictive, unwilling to let go. Others praised her for standing up against decades of quiet humiliation. Inside Forrester, everything fractured. Designers took sides. Models whispered. Board members panicked. The Italy show teetered on the edge of collapse. But Eric, frail and tired, pushed through. With Donna's help, he made one final push to keep the family afloat. He called in favors. He met with the Italian Commission personally. He begged Ridge to settle the lawsuit privately. But it was too late. The damage was done. The statement had gone public. The court filings were real. The only thing left was fallout. And Ridge? Ridge stood at the center of it all, a man with a signature on a statement he now regretted more than anything in his life. The show in Italy went ahead. Barely. Taylor walked the runway with grace, her head held high. Steffi stood beside her mother, proud. Ridge walked behind them, praised by press as a man who defended the women in his life. But when the cameras weren't flashing, when the lights dimmed, he looked toward the edge of the stage. Brooke wasn't there. She hadn't come to Italy. And in the silence of that absence, something inside Ridge cracked. He had made the right move for the brand. For his fiancée. For the company. But he had lost the woman who had always been the moral compass in his chaotic life. Brooke, for all her flaws, had always seen him, not just the designer, not just the son, not just the man pulled between two worlds, but the human. And now she was gone. Not in anger. Not in scandal. Just gone. He tried to call. She didn't answer. He sent a handwritten letter. No response. Her silence spoke volumes. It wasn't a punishment. It was a boundary. One that she had drawn for the first time in years. Ridge, the man who once had two women fighting for his attention, now sat alone, staring at the ruins of what once had been a family, a partnership, a home. Taylor, though victorious in headlines, felt the weight of the win. She hadn't asked for a public statement. She hadn't asked Ridge to choose her this way. And now, with the lawsuit looming, the company in chaos and Ridge emotionally distant, she saw the cost. Her children rallied around her, but she couldn't shake the image of that slap, the way Ridge's hand had moved before he even thought. The look in his eyes. The hurt. The rage. And maybe, just maybe, the fear. Back in Los Angeles, Brooke returned to work. Not at Forrester. At her own foundation. She rebranded, restarted, and slowly rebuilt. The lawsuit progressed slowly. She didn't speak to the press. She let her lawyers handle the noise. But privately, she found peace in distance. For the first time in decades, she wasn't tied to Ridge. Not emotionally. Not romantically. Not publicly. She had found a different version of strength, one that didn't need validation or applause. Forrester Creations continued, but the air inside the building had changed. Ridge kept working, kept designing, but the fire was dimmer. Eric, proud of holding the company together, grew weaker by the day. Donna feared that the next crisis might be one too many. And so the war that began with a slap turned into a battle of reputation, love, and legacy. Ridge had won on paper. But Brooke's broken stare in that final boardroom meeting stayed with him. It wasn't the lawsuit. It wasn't the headlines. It was that look, the one that said, *, you just lost the only person who truly believed in you. Asterisk, and that loss, Ridge knew, would echo far longer than any public scandal. The days after the Italy show were colder than Ridge expected, not because of the climate, but because of the silence. For the first time in his life, he had achieved what should have felt like a clear win. The public was on his side. The media praised his loyalty to Taylor, the show had gone on, and Forrester Creations' reputation had narrowly escaped ruin. But none of it felt like victory. He returned to Los Angeles not to applause, but to distance. Taylor, though technically by his side, had grown more formal. The warmth, the intimacy, the trust, it had dulled under the weight of obligation and the memory of that one impulsive moment. She smiled for the cameras, touched his arm at board meetings, but at home, the space between them had grown. And Ridge couldn't ignore it. Brooke stayed silent. Her lawyers moved forward with the civil suit, carefully measured but unrelenting. Every motion, every press inquiry, every subpoena was precise. She didn't drag Ridge through the mud. She didn't need to. Her absence spoke louder than any tabloid headline. Ridge hadn't seen her since before the show. He watched from a distance as she rebranded her foundation, gave quiet interviews on women's empowerment, and surrounded herself with allies who didn't care about Forrester or family politics. She looked stronger, independent, unreachable. And every day that passed, Ridge began to see not just what he had lost, but why he lost it. Taylor began to feel it too. What she had wanted for so long, a future with Ridge unchallenged by Brooke's presence, now felt hollow. Their dinners turned into meetings. Ridge spent more time in his studio, sketching endlessly, producing pieces he never submitted. She tried to talk to him, but he wasn't there, not really. And deep down, she feared that what had brought them together this time wasn't love, but pressure. The accident. The scandal. The image. She watched him drift further from her, emotionally lost in thoughts he never shared. Steffi tried to keep her mother's spirits up, throwing herself into her PR campaign, continuing to manage the narrative that positioned Taylor as the wronged party and Brooke as the predator. But the public's attention span was short, and soon, even the fashion world moved on. Buyers returned. Editors shifted focus. But inside the Forrester offices, things hadn't healed. Designers whispered about Ridge's detachment. Interns tiptoed past his door. Hope Logan, Brooke's daughter, resumed her work, but with a cold professionalism that made meetings unbearable. She avoided Ridge when she could and Steffi always. Eric's condition worsened. His energy drained faster. He spent more time in bed, and his episodes of confusion grew frequent. Donna barely left his side, and though she didn't say it aloud, she blamed the family drama for accelerating his decline. Ridge visited often, sitting quietly by his father's side, holding his hand when words failed. Eric, even in weakness, tried to impart advice, whispering fragments like, "Don't lose yourself," or "Fix what matters." Ridge heard him, but he didn't know how to fix something so thoroughly broken. The court date for Brooke's civil case was approaching. Lawyers on both sides pushed for settlement, but Ridge hesitated. Signing a settlement meant admitting the damage. Fighting it meant dragging it further. And all the while, he dreamed of her, Brooke, every night. Not in romantic fantasies, but in flashbacks. The way she had once looked at him when no one else believed in him. The way she'd pulled him out of his worst mistakes without ever shaming him. He remembered her voice telling him he was better than this. He remembered how it used to feel to walk into a room and see her smile because he was there. One night, Ridge stood outside Brooke's home. He didn't knock. He just stood there, staring at the light behind the curtains, the soft music playing inside. And then the door opened. Brooke stepped out. She had seen him through the window. She didn't smile. She didn't speak. Ridge opened his mouth to say something, anything, but she just shook her head. "Don't," she said softly. "Whatever you came here to say it in court." Then she closed the door. The trial was brief but brutal. Brooke's legal team presented her as a woman defamed and discarded. Ridge's team tried to argue the statement had been corporate necessity, not personal judgment. The judge, however, saw through it. He reprimanded Ridge publicly for issuing a declaration that humiliated a former partner without due process or discussion. The verdict didn't assign monetary damages. It granted Brooke a public retraction and forced Ridge to issue a statement clearing her name. When Ridge read it aloud at the press conference, every word caught in his throat. Brooke Logan is not the person described in previous statements, he read, and I deeply regret any implication to the contrary. Her character, her contributions to this company, and her personal dignity remain beyond question. I take full responsibility for my role in harming her public image. Brooke wasn't there. She watched from home alone. When he finished, Ridge looked up, and for the first time in months, his face was naked, no charm, no poise. Just a man who finally saw what he had become. Taylor watched too. And that night, she sat Ridge down. Her voice was calm. She didn't cry. She didn't beg. I think, she said, you've been chasing the wrong kind of peace. He didn't argue. He didn't ask her to stay. And quietly, they agreed to separate. Weeks passed. Forrester Creations weathered the storm. The fashion house survived, but the dynamics inside changed permanently. Steffi scaled back her campaign. Hope returned to prominence. Ridge stepped back from day-to-day operations, taking a sabbatical to travel. He visited small towns in Italy, France, and eventually Aspen. He wrote in a journal. He painted. And slowly, he began to untangle who he was without the pull of two women vying for his soul. Brooke continued her work, quietly expanding her foundation and becoming a speaker for women's dignity and boundary setting. She received letters, many from Ridge. She didn't reply, but she read them all. And one day, months later, she sent one back. It wasn't a declaration. It wasn't forgiveness. It was one sentence: I'm doing better now. I hope you are too. That sentence was both a goodbye and a beginning. And for the first time in his life, Ridge Forrester understood the difference between love that fills a void and love that asks nothing but truth.